This episode is brought to you with support from BetterHelp. What gets in the way of your happiness or achieving your goals? BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with a licensed professional therapist so you can connect safely and privately within 48 hours of requesting an appointment. BetterHelp lets you connect one-to-one with a counselor online, and they're committed to helping you find the right counselor, so it's easy to switch therapists if it's not a good fit. Also, you have access to therapists with a broad range of expertise, some of which may not be easy to find near you. You can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, and everything you share is confidential. Also, you can send messages to your counselor anytime and get prompt and thoughtful responses. Start living a happier life today. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/nocturne. Join over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's betterhelp.com/nocturne. Thanks, BetterHelp. You're listening to Nocturne. I'm Vanessa Lowe.
I was really nervous before. Me and my brothers were kind of scared, and then it was time to go, and they put our blindfolds on, and I was kind of thinking to myself, like, what am I doing? Like, this is so weird. And then we got in the car, and they were driving and, like, taking all these turns. We had no idea where we were, and then they made us, like, hold hands, still blindfolded, hold hands, and then walk up to this, like, hill where he dropped us off. And I remember, like, I had no idea where we were, so I was, like, trying to peep through, like, the crack in my blindfold and look at the ground to see if I had any idea, and I didn't. And then he took off the blindfold, and I still had no idea where I was. And I was sort of thinking, like, we're going to be out here forever. Like, this is going to take us hours to get home. It was pretty quiet. We didn't really hear anything except for our own footsteps. And then occasionally my dad would make, like, a sound. Like, he'd make, like, a monkey noise or, like, a scream and try to scare us a little bit.
This is not what it sounds like, which to me is either the plot of a semi-scary horror movie or some deranged form of parental torture.
Dropping is something that a lot of Dutch parents do with their kids. It's sort of a tradition, which I've never experienced anywhere else. Basically, parents blindfold your kids and put them into cars and drive them around and try to confuse them so they get lost. And then they leave them in the middle of the woods at like 2 a.m. and they let you find your way home.
The kids are literally walking in the dark in the middle of nowhere. They are out there till they find their way back, so some droppings get out of hand and it takes forever for kids, like maybe the whole night, to get back to home base.
That's the hardcore version of dropping, more common with older kids.
And you know, sometimes they put like little notes in the trees to let them know that like you're going the right way. Or sometimes they just like let you fend for yourself and you have to find your way back. People say that it's because they want their kids to learn how to rely on themselves and be more independent. And instead of like running to your parents when you're afraid or don't know what to do, you have to figure out what to do yourself with the things that you have around you, with your environment. But I also just think that it's sometimes fun for parents to scare their kids. I know my dad had a lot of fun. I'm Maritza de Savernan Lohman. I'm 19 years old.
My name is Diederik Lohman.
That's Maritza's dad.
I am originally from the Netherlands, but I've been in the US for the last, almost 20 years. From my perspective, it's a fun activity that I really enjoyed when I was a kid. You know, it brings kind of the excitement of being dropped off somewhere in the dark. You don't know where, you have to find your own way home. It's something that, usually droppings happen at like summer camps or, kind of organized activities, mostly for teenagers.
I was probably like 9 or 10.
I don't remember exactly how old I was, but Yeah, I'm sure I was a teen. It's a bonding experience with, with other kids, with friends. It's an adventure. I associate it with, just having a really good time.
When Diederik did dropping as a kid, the practice had minimal adult involvement.
I don't remember exactly what camp this was, but it was like a kind of a summer camp or a weekend camp. And we were basically taken, out at night. It was dark, to a location that we didn't know. And we were with a group of people, all similar ages. And then we, were basically dropped there in like a kind of a forested, woody area with the mission of finding our way back home. We were not equipped with like survival packages or anything like that. At the time, there were no cell phones, and so we really had very little in ways of communicating with anyone.
When Americans hear about dropping, they're often alarmed. They can't imagine abandoning their kids in the dark woods. In fact, it seems like something you could get arrested for.
We go to the Netherlands every summer because my dad's family lives there.
Where we go for vacation in the summer in the Netherlands is an area that is fairly remote. There's farmland and then quite a significant amount of forest.
I remember one time my dad and our family friend were driving us to one of the droppings. This was when I was like 13 or something like that. And there were 6 of us or something. And we didn't all fit in the car. So there were 3 people in the back seat, 1 person across the laps, and then 2 people like in the hatchback. And we were all blindfolded. And they like went around a bunch of times on a roundabout and did like a bunch of sharp right turns to confuse us and get us lost. And I remember we were on the roundabout, and it was like the 4th time we'd been around, and we hear sirens, and my dad's like, oh shit, it's the cops. And we get pulled over, and the cop comes up to us, and he like knocks on the window, and he's like, sir, you've circled this roundabout like 4 times. Have you been drinking? And then he looks in the back and sees all these blindfolded kids, and there are way too many kids in the car. And he was like, what is going on here? And my dad was like, officer, I'm so sorry, we're doing a dropping. And he like stops him and he's like, oh, I'm so sorry for interrupting. Like, you keep going, go on your way.
That's how widely accepted the practice of dropping is in the Netherlands.
It's a way when you meet new kids. So we went to high school and we didn't know the other kids, and that's the thing to do. It's still the thing to do, to have this experience around that age when you go to a new group. You do it with, like, if you start a field hockey season, you just organize a dropping and the parents all think it's fun. I'm Pia de Jong. I'm 58. I live in Princeton, New Jersey in the United States, and I'm Dutch. I'm from Holland, actually, the Netherlands.
While dropping is often done in the context of Boy Scout-like activities, with education about reading a compass or navigating by the moon, that's not always the case. At its core, it's about challenging kids to be self-reliant and use their own ingenuity, rather than rely on adults. And what makes it so interesting to me is that the Dutch use the archetypal boogeyman of the night as the foundation for this challenge.
The purpose of the dropping is something like, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. So if you find your way in the dark, in the woods, and after you've been scared and you're hungry, you're crying, you kind of won something. You just kind of learned to trust your inner force. You become, a stronger person. You didn't know you had that energy or you didn't have that force. You're like an adolescent and you're about to embark on the rest of your life, and you have these tools inside you that you didn't know you had.
Although that's not what happened for Pia.
No, not at all, of course. What I got out of it was this kids that are like scared and already being homesick before, and it was cold and it was like a little bit rainy. It's just not fun. And I got not like traumatized, I think that's a big word, but I still get this thing when I go in a place and I don't have any direction, I get like sweaty and I panic. So I have this lifelong fear of getting lost.
I mean, yeah, let's listen to Pia again.
In the dark, in the woods, and after you've been scared and you're hungry, you're crying, this is a scary thing. It works well for people who are like adventurous, but it's not for kids who are afraid. And it's definitely not for kids who get lost and it doesn't work out and they get like maybe traumatized.
Yes, there definitely is an element of creating a little bit of discomfort for the kids, but in a way that, that is fun for them.
The younger kids don't usually get left in the forest without an adult somewhere nearby. But even still, the dark woods can be a harsh teacher.
The first time my younger brother went, it was like 7 or something like that. So it was his first dropping. I remember my dad and our family friend, they drove us and they dropped us off in the middle of a cornfield. So we took off our blindfolds and there were like corn stalks like towering over us, and we had no sense of direction because we were just in like thousands of corn stalks and we couldn't see anything, and we were kind of like, oh my God, which way do we go? And my dad had given us a clue to like use our compass and go north or something. So we're trying to figure out which way to go, and then all of a sudden we hear this like blood-curdling scream from my dad, and we all get so scared. I remember we all just fell on top of each other. Like we were all just laying on the ground, like in between each other's legs, and then got up and started like scrambling, but there was nowhere to run because there were corn stalks everywhere. And then we start running and we're all like screaming, and then I see that my brother is like standing there bawling because he was so scared. And I went up to him and I was like, Nikita, it's gonna be okay. Like, it's just Papa, it's just Papa. And I tried to calm him down because I'd been there too, but it didn't work. And my dad had to come get him and take him home because he couldn't do it anymore. It took him like 2 years to do it again. He was really frightened.
I did a dropping when I was 12 years old, with I think is typically the age when people are going on their first dropping. And the occasion was also very typical for when to happen, which was the beginning of high school. And we had like a camp to get to know all the other children, which was about, say, an hour and a half driving from where we lived. So we had no idea where we were. It was really on the verge of where the woods started. And one thing was maybe a little bit different because we had a nun with us. And her name was Sister Nun Edeltrudis, which is a very Dutch old-fashioned name. And she had no idea what she was going into. So she was our teacher and she was going to be with us on this dropping. And we were just left there, as you do with a dropping, on their own to figure out where am I and what kind of direction do I go. So you start to talk to the others and deliberate, and you hope somebody knows anything about the moon, because they don't teach you a thing of where the moon is and how to find any direction. And of course this was before cell phones, so nobody had any clue. And we didn't even have a compass. We just knew we had to go into this woods, because you always have to go into the woods to find our way home. And that's what we did. And we stumbled on this path, and after a while, some kids really got like anxious and, are we really on the right direction? And it's dark and there was no lights, so we have no idea which path to go. And you get hungry and you get irritated, and it's really a scary thing. I remember this was in September. It's smelling the fall, that sour smell, and then thinking like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be, gonna be raining maybe. What's gonna happen here? The person who was, the most afraid actually turned out to be the nun. She had the least idea, and she got the most scared of all of us.
I don't know about you, but being lost in the woods at night and having an adult clearly spooked and at a loss as to what to do seems almost scarier than being there with just other kids.
And so we went further and further, no path, and some kids started to cry. It was really scary. And then at some point we really had to decide and, say like, okay, we are all lost here. We have no idea. And the nun started to sing songs. It's like a very Dutch song. It's something like, en van je hele hola houten moet erin. Means something like, keep calm and carry on. Like, don't give up. With this kind of voice, this high soprano, because she was used in singing in the church. I can still hear her singing that she was frightened. She was just not used to probably being in the real world at all, let alone in the night. I felt scared, but I also felt very responsible for the other kids that were even more scared. And I felt already then, like, why the hell am I doing this? I think that was my basic feeling. Like, why do we do this? Why? I just want to be in my bed. I just want to get this over with. And this annoying feeling that I still get when you're lost, like, you know, you're going in circles and going there for like maybe the sixth time and thinking you recognize that one strange tree and that smell, and there's some pine needle that you think you recognize, like, I've been here and it's an hour since then and I am not one step further than before. It took forever till like really after midnight before we were basically found by somebody who was calling our names, and because I think they got worried, like, where's these kids, where's the nun? And so that was my dropping experience.
That was Pia's first and last dropping, sort of.
No, I didn't do any drop. This was it. And I think it was enough for the rest of my life. And that, well, the other thing is I did do droppings, which is a little bit different maybe. But my father organized these things that, you know, he dropped us somewhere, but then he gave us it was like a puzzle. He gave us little clues like, oh, and you go to this strange tree with this, you know, skewed branch. And then there was hidden something like a little note that he wrote for us, like a riddle. And so it was like, oh, go to where the river is. So you went to the river. So that was a lot of things we did as a kid, which were like that. But then there was guidance.
When Diederik took his family to the wooded property in the Netherlands, he also wanted to provide his kids with the core of the dropping experience that he'd had as a child, but maybe without the chance of them never being seen again.
I think I have actually been in a way more kind of careful than I was treated as a kid during droppings. I mean, times have also changed, right? I mean, when I was a kid in the 70s and early 80s, it was safer. Also, you know, when we started doing this, I think, you know, my kids were a little younger than I was when I started doing the droppings. And obviously, you know, there's a big difference between being 11 and being 14, 15. So the way I remember it, we were in a group, we were dropped somewhere, and there were no adults in the immediate vicinity. The adults just kind of left, and we had to find our way home. When we started doing this with our kids, you know, I didn't want to just leave them in the forest. And so what we ended up doing was a friend of mine and I would put kind of hints and clues, questions, etc. in the forest. Like, you know, there's this song by the Pet Shop Boys, Go West. And so the clue might be, you know, do as the Pet Shop Boys would do. And, you know, by giving them clues, it almost became more like a treasure hunt with, you know, getting home as the ultimate prize. And we also would kind of follow them, put on dark clothes and, you know, try to kind of stay hidden in the forest, but follow them. And, you know, when they would go completely in the wrong direction, we would suddenly appear and like make scary noises in order to kind of make it clear to them that they had gone the wrong way. The idea is to, you know, make it hard enough that they aren't home within 5 minutes, but also make sure that they can find their way. But at the same time, making sure that they're not too comfortable.
The woods were really cold, and it was really dark, obviously. And it was sort of quiet, but we were like deep in the forest, so the trees were really thick. So you could barely see like the light of the moon. The only light that we had was from our flashlights, and that only went like a few feet in front of us. So it was like we were all holding hands or like holding the back of each other's sweaters and walking along, and we couldn't really see anything except for our feet. My dad did tell us before he took off our blindfolds that he left just like little slips of paper stuck on branches, and we had to walk like 50 feet. And if we hadn't found one of those papers, that meant that we were going the wrong way. So it was hard to find those papers and things in the trees because it was so dark and we didn't have any other light. We knew that my dad was still there, just making sure that everything was fine, but we didn't see him at all. He was just like hiding behind trees and sort of following us.
So Diederik made sure that nothing truly dangerous would happen. But that was actually small comfort to Maritza and the other kids.
Honestly, I think knowing that he was somewhere behind the trees made me more scared than if he hadn't been there. Because obviously, like, the reason he was there was to make sure that we were safe and nothing happened. But that's not what it seemed like to us. The only time we really saw him in the woods was when he made some scary noise or like made a loud noise and we would jump and run. So it kind of made it worse having him there, or it made it more nerve-wracking because he was sort of what we were running from.
Most of the accounts of droppings I came across were positive, although if you search, you can find a few reports of kids getting hit by cars on the side of the road. So now there are more regulations in place, such as reflective vests and emergency phones for the kids. Even still, it's a beloved practice, and according to a New York Times article from a couple of years ago, droppings are such a normal part of Dutch childhood that many there are surprised to even be asked about it, assuming it's a common practice around the world.
I have no idea how this started, who kind of came up with this idea of just dropping kids somewhere in the woods and leaving them there to find their way back. I can't say it's in our genes, but it's something that, because a lot of kids have that experience and enjoy the experience, it's something that becomes a tradition that you want to continue to, kind of pass on to the next generation. For me, that was kind of the main motivation.
Most kids I know went through a dropping. I have 3 children and they did droppings. And I feel a little bit guilty about them going through droppings because it's the same moment. High school started and I just forgot to ask, are you going to do a dropping? But they did something similar. They put these kids in the middle of nowhere and had them find their way home. And they didn't like it either. I think they thought it was just kind of scary and they were completely wet. And I think my oldest, it took like all night for them to come home. We were still living in the Netherlands then. In America, if I let my kids do anything, even watch a movie about going into the wild, you have to sign off on that. This is helicopter parent land in America. They control everything that goes into your child. But in Holland, they just don't do that. Culture is something that you do because other people do that. So if everybody signs off that, for instance, at a school here, is it allowed for kids to get sexual teachings in a school? Then you just sign off because you do that because everybody does that. And if your kid goes to prom, which I found also a little bit of a strange experience, you just let your kid go to prom. So in Holland, you don't think twice about it. It's just like they go to camp and they probably take care of your kids, you hope, and you don't even think twice, but yeah, there will be a dropping. Of course there will be a dropping.
When we finally, near the end of the dropping, we knew where we were, finally. We recognized the property, and we were like, oh yeah, we found it. And then all of a sudden we, hear these, really fast, steps behind us, like someone was running. And my dad starts, screaming, so loud, bloody murder, and we all get so scared and run as fast as we can all the way back to the house. So it was terrifying. I realized it was him after a few seconds, but that first second when I heard the footsteps coming after me, I was so scared. It didn't matter who it was. It was the middle of the night and it was dark and my mom wasn't there, so I just ran as fast as I could and I didn't look back. And I mean, in the back of my head, I knew it was my dad. But it was still scary. It didn't matter who it was. It was exhausting. I remember coming back, I went straight to bed. But it was worth it.
You just drop kids in the woods and you make sure they don't die, and then you just hope they find their own way. And it's a bit of a jokingly said, but I think it's part of the Dutch culture that kids have to find their own way in life. And as parents, you're only there for such a short period. I think it's part of growing up that it's up to me and there are no parents. I think that's a valuable experience in a way.
The whole point is that you're not with your parents and they don't tell you what to do. It's you're sort of getting a look into like independence. Because like you grow up and your parents are your support system and they're your security, and they tell you what to do when you don't know what to do, and they take that away from you. You're supposed to rely on yourself and make your own decisions. And being scared is part of it. Like if you're not scared, then honestly it's not really fun. I think it's definitely an experience that nobody here in New Jersey can relate to. It sort of makes me more interesting, I think. But Dutch kids are more independent. They just become more self-sufficient.
I'm completely ambivalent about this experience. So there's the American Pia since 7 years talking, and there's the Dutch Pia who just didn't think, twice about it. But I think it says really something about the Dutch culture, that you are basically on your own in life and you have to figure out your own path. So in Holland, I think whatever path in life you take will be your own responsibility, which is a good thing. I think American kids are, to my opinion, overprotected. So I think it would be good for American kids to get a little bit loose of their parents.
I don't disagree with that sentiment, but it would also take a lot for me to drop my now 15-year-old son in the woods in the middle of the night and say, good luck, see you later. But at the same time, I am aware that when I think about doing that, I get this sort of warm, excited tingle in my stomach, and this deep sense that there's so much there to be gained by being lost in the woods at night. Where is the sweet spot between danger and the potential for incredible personal growth? Because, of course, the dark woods are not just the dark woods. They're a metaphor for so much more.
It's nice being able to say, like, oh yeah, I found my way back in the middle of the woods, in the middle of the night, like all by myself. I don't know, you feel accomplished. And when I first heard about it, like I never thought that I would be able to do that. I thought that sounded crazy and I would be lost in the woods till like 6 a.m. And I did it and it was fine. And I realized that I could do like a lot more than I thought I could.
You've been listening to Nocturne. I'm Vanessa Lowe. Nocturne is produced by me and was created by myself and Kent Sparling, who also composed the theme music. Thanks to BetterHelp for supporting Nocturne. For 10% off your first month, go to betterhelp.com/nocturne. Connect one-on-one with the counselor online to get help and feel better. Again, that's betterhelp.com/nocturne. Music in this episode is from Janet Fetter, Miles Boyson, Pollen Music Group, Kent Sparling, and Kid Otter. Nocturne is mainly supported by listeners like you, either on Patreon or PayPal. And I am so, so grateful for all of you who chip in whatever amount you can. Thank you. Very special thanks this month to Colleen Hamilton, Clayton Myers, and Nate Landon for supporting us at the Happy Possum level on Patreon. Find out how you can help keep the show going strong at nocturnepodcast.org/support. Thanks so much for listening. Till next time, be well.